Now, I would like to welcome SCSA President Collin Pullar to lead us in the last session of the day, an armchair discussion on the future of construction and safety. Collin holds a Master of Business Administration and a Master's Certificate in Public Management from the University of Regina, an Institute of Corporate Directors designation, and is a candidate for the Charter Professional in Human Resources designation. Collin is also active in the business community as a member of the Minister's Advisory Committee for the Minister of Labour Relations and Workplace Safety, and board director for the Saskatchewan Legal Aid Commission, Regina Exhibition Association, and Access Communications, and former chair of the Regina Chamber of Commerce. He also sits on the Saskatchewan's Labour Market Information Committee for Build Force Canada. Boy, that's a lot of talking, Collin. Take it away.
Thanks, Kelly. Really appreciate that. And, I'll also thank all of our speakers this morning, Minister Morgan, Robbie for what you've shared, Robbie from MLT, and of course, Joanna. Very motivating discussion, and I think it'll fuel our discussion here today. I'm really excited about having this discussion on the future of construction, really a thought leadership discussion on some global issues and the science of safety in construction. I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Mike Court, who's the Senior Vice President of Health, Safety, Environment, Quality, and Sustainability at Graham Construction. Mike is a results-driven executive with over 25 years of experience and leadership and governance in the areas of health, safety, environment, and quality management, as well as corporate sustainability. He's a founding member and the current chair of the board of Construction Safety Research Alliance, based out of the University of Colorado, Boulder. Mike has a diploma in occupational health safety technology from British Columbia Institute of Technology, as well as completed an executive development program at Smith School of Business at Queen's University, and an executive sustainability program at New York University Stern School of Business. He's got a vast range of experience in the industry as a journeyman carpenter, superintendent, project manager. I'd like to welcome you, Mike.
Thanks, Collin.
So today, Mike, we're going to have a conversation. We're probably just better part of an hour to have a conversation about on a couple of key areas. One is just global discussion on some of the things that are major trends happening in the construction sector, particularly when we get into discussions around environmental, social, and governance issues. It's becoming a growing area, but also really like to hear about some of the work around the Construction Safety Research Alliance as an organization. I know the two issues are linked, or the two items are linked, and hoping that again over this next hour, I get a chance to learn a lot from you, and as we kind of go through a discussion. So. Mike, maybe just from you some opening thoughts, if you had any, just really around a couple of these issues, and then I'll dive into maybe a few questions to launch things.
Well, first off, thanks for having me. It's a great opportunity to talk about some of the work we're doing, and a powerful message around Michael we just heard, and directly ties to why Graham and myself we are looking for solutions to prevent fatalities. And I'll jump right into why we helped create the CSRA, Collin, because it directly ties to Michael's story. Mm-hmm. For years in the industry, we know that our numbers we use to measure safety have continued to go down year after year after year. 20 years we've been doing great numbers, but the fatality rate in Canada and the US is plateaued. It's remained constant. So we need to do something different. And, in the safety profession, we keep repackaging things and calling it something different and hoping for a change when it doesn't occur. And at Graham, we started focusing on our energy potential release as our highest priority, our high energy potential release scopes of work in the project. And quite frankly, our potential energy releases even more so. Those 1 second, 1 inch away events that could have caused a SIF or, worse, a fatality. And so we're heavily focused on that, and we've been focused on it for years. And about the same time we made this switch, there's about 6 of us got together. Those of us who knew Dr. Matt Hollowell from the University of Colorado, and he was struggling with the same question. He's actually the one that we worked with our energy wheel and energy model. We call it Hurt and Energy Model at Graham, and our heavy focus on P-SIFs. And he got 4 or 5 of us together 4.5 years ago now, almost 5. Say, well, we got to do something different. And my idea is, let's put safety to science. It's never really been done this way before. We need to look at our existing safety processes and theories and find out why they're not having the desired effect we anticipate in preventing SIFs. So the marriage of academia and industry was created with 6 of us in a room in the University of Colorado 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago. And that day we mapped out our vision statement, and it's carried us through to this day, which is to eliminate SIFs in the construction industry through transformative research and defendable science. And Matt's, back then we had a team of 2 people in the CSRA, Matt and one other person, and the 5 of us from industry, 6 of us from industry, and off we went. And today we have 82 members across North America, the world, to be frank. And Matt's CSRA team has grown dramatically. And we're setting the seeds for safety scientists, quite frankly, to help drive us over the next 5, 10, 20 years on hopefully changing the face of safety in construction to start, and then we'll go somewhere else. But we have to do something different. And the first thing we looked at, as you know, Collin, as a member, was the tyranny of TRIR. The one measure we all use, for a lagging measure we all use to judge our safety performance. And we all knew it was a bit off. It wasn't quite accurate, but we were quite shocked to find just how inaccurate it is and not a very good measure of safety.
Mike, just on that point for that total recordable injury rate, that was the way that many of us learned. Though many have come through different academic programs, great safety programs. That was the accepted, at least the historically accepted way to look at things. And like, what have you seen that's different
in the TRIR itself?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the research definitely proved how inaccurate it is, and a measure we shouldn't use. I mean, we can't lose it. It has value. There's value in the TRIR and TRIF in terms of focus and culture and other things. But as a measure of safety to make us feel comfortable we're doing what we need to do to prevent SIFs, it's not a good measurement. And so, quite frankly, might as well roll the dice. It's more accurate. I'd encourage everybody, if they haven't read it, go to the CSRA webpage and read our paper on that. And again, it was peer reviewed, and no one's countered it so far. But so we said it sucks. So now what do? We have to figure out new leading indicators that help us drive prevention of SIFs. So that's the journey we're on over the next 3 years.
The research that's being done at the Alliance, and perhaps if we have an opportunity, we'll bring up the website just so people are familiar with some of the things. And I encourage people who are watching or listening today to take a look at some of the things on this website. But it has become a research platform where a number of learnings can be brought back to industry. It's directed by industry, and all of the questions are being brought by people who work in the industry, by companies like yourself and many others. And I think the flow of information that the things that we can discover are things that all of us can learn from. Are there subject areas in particular that you've been able to focus on in the last couple of years that you're really getting some tangible benefit from, that you think our folks listening or watching today should know about?
Well, I think, if we look at our past projects, the ones that are posted and available. By the way, this is all open source as well, because this is about supporting the industry that we all love. And I think some of the big hit items for me, or the past research items that are out there, are the precursors to SIF. Some pretty good work on predictive analytics and what the reality is there, because we were told we can do that all the time, but it's not as easy as it sounds. And quality safety leading indicators probably jump out the most. The biggest one that we're working on, and it's a 2 to 3 year research project, is the ROI of safety. The question we're all asked, the question we'd all love to answer. So where do we deploy our budgets and resources to have the biggest effect on preventing fatalities or serious injuries? That'll be the big one. That'll be the one we're all looking forward to and focused in on. And then for me, the other one is the high energy controls. So Graham is heavily focused on our hurt and energy model, focused on our high energy controls, and everything we do, from our FLRAs to our interventions to our leadership walkabouts. It's all about the energy release potential and putting the resources there to mitigate the potential SIFs. And it's working. Our performance is fantastic, and I hate even talking about it because I'm knock on some wood somewhere here. But I hate talking about it, but it's easy to pick up from an operational perspective and operationalize it into existing processes that most of us have. It's easy for the field to understand. It's looking at energy release versus rule-based, which is different. Some people don't like that, but quite frankly, that's what causes injury, is energy. So why should we not focus on energy release? So those are the big ones for me, Collin. And the other big one that it's very important to the construction industry, to me personally, is that we kicked off a mental health research study in the construction industry. So as we know, the construction industry is struggling with mental health and health and wellness in general. And that's a very important piece of research we're doing. And we've done phase 1. We're just about to kick off phase 2. And again, this is going to help industry deploy resources where we need to help our frontline and our leadership on a day-to-day basis with all the stressors we go through and mental health issues we're seeing.
Yeah. Mike, just as you're saying that, we're just going to bring up the site. Yeah, thank you very much for bringing this up. I think it's worth noting, Mike, while this is primarily a North American group, there's a lot of Canadians that are driving and providing leadership to this. Of course, yourself. I'll mention this mental health focus. There's a survey that we've recently distributed. That's part of this. For those who are on our electronic newsletter, if you're not signed up for a newsletter, please sign up for it. There's been a couple of messages here recently about a mental health survey. I believe Bert Royer with Ironworkers is co-chairing that, and Bert's the Canadian director for Ironworkers, and so once again some significant leadership coming out of Canada on this. And so I think it's, I think it's worth noting that we have an opportunity as an association, the members of this association, to participate in this, and then also sharing the benefits from what we can learn from this over the next few years, Mike. So thank you. We're just putting the link to the newsletter. Oh, there it is on the screen. So thank you. Thanks for talking about that, Mike. I think there's a couple of other areas in here that I thought were really exciting, that are happening around the alliance and the work being done, that even the SCSAs haven't had an opportunity to has some opportunity to input on. And I want to acknowledge our membership for participating in this. Is a lot of the works that we've been doing around safety analytics. If it's relatively new to our members, just something introduced here in the last year or two, but it's a platform that layers several groups of data, both their historic data from their injury reports into Workers' Compensation Board, but also layers audit data, training data, culture survey data that provides some really interesting inputs and information directly for employers, that they themselves, whether they're running a 2-person shop or a 200-person shop, can actually get some real-time information and insight into their own business. If those of you who are listening or watching aren't familiar with this, please contact one of our advisors, and you can connect through our website, and be happy to share this. It's completely free of charge to all of our B-rate code members. But a lot of the data that and the insights that we're getting, we're also sharing with the Research Alliance, because it's quite fascinating information, and particularly with the culture survey work that's being done. And Mike, if would you be able to talk a little bit about some of that particular project and some of the work being done around measuring culture and kind of the direction of that?
Well, I'll try. That Dr. Fred from the CSRA should be talking about this one. So, they, the data you've submitted is greatly appreciated. It was a large deposit of data, and so kudos to you and your team and the work we're doing to support that. But yeah, I mean, the safety culture, we hear it all the time. To be blunt, what the hell is it? What does it really mean? So it's a study to attempt to scientifically measure, if we can, culture. What is the criteria to determine a positive culture in the prevention of SIF? So everything's got to and should tie back to our vision, which is preventing fatalities and serious injuries. So what culture is required? Can you measure that culture? How do you even measure it in the first place? I mean, it's a pretty complex question and a pretty complex research project. And there's some very intelligent human behavior specialists and doctors that are working on it. So I'm not giving it any justice whatsoever, but I would encourage you to, again, visit the website and look at what the criteria is for that research project, and reach out to Dr. Fred. She'd be more than happy to talk with you or your company if you're interested. And it's going to be an important one. It's another one. I mean, everything we're doing, I'm looking forward to, and the industry should be looking forward to seeing, because like I mentioned, we have to do things differently and look at things differently if we want to prevent fatalities in construction. So these projects are not picked haphazardly. We look at, I'm in Denver right now for our spring board meeting, and we just got an update on a few of these. But in August, we're picking the new topics for the next year, 2 or 3 years out. And so it's a rigorous process to figure out where we're going to deploy our resources to best serve the construction industry.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And again, in the analytics platform, and those again watching, and and if you're on our newsletter, you would have seen another recent push in just collecting information around that culture survey work. There's some work that has been done by the Institute of Work and Health in Canada over the last few years on this, and we've been able to use their tools for industry. We're beginning to get some insight into that. And for members in Saskatchewan, just so you know, this right now, it's the largest pool of data in Canada at an industry level right now. And so very proud of our members for leaning in on this, and hundreds of companies so far have been participating in that. It's giving us some learnings. It's giving companies learnings into themselves, particularly small businesses, some insight into themselves, and kind of validating, okay, we've done the book work, we've done the audit stuff. There's some things that might give some indication as to some of the behavior elements as well. But I think it's still early in the process of learning, and some of the work that the Research Alliance is going to be diving into, I think it'll help inform some of that. But I think there's going to be a whole lot for us, all of us, to learn out of there for sure. Mike, maybe one more question on this, or maybe a couple more questions on this before we pivot to our next area. But when you talked about the energy wheel, and I wonder if I think we have a slide that we can give an example of the energy wheel, and the concept of shifting to looking at injuries from an energy perspective. Could you talk a little bit more about that? And we'll try to get just an image to help support the discussion and illustration.
Yeah, well, there's the grain one. There you go. I mean, again, this Dr. Matt Hollowell helped push this out in industry, and it's been around. Don't tell him I said this, for a while longer than he did, but it didn't really get the attention it deserved, in my opinion. And it makes complete sense when you think about it. Like, why aren't we focused on the energy release potentials on our scopes of work? A lot of our traditional inspections back in the day were all focused on rule violations to our processes and our standards. And we need that, sure. But is it really preventing injuries on site? I would say no. So when we intervene on a high energy release potential that has no direct control in place to manage that risk, that's a high potential event for a SIF. And that's why, about 5 years ago, we started focusing on this and rolled out our hurt and energy model at Graham, and changed our FLRA to focus on energy releases, and our interventions to talk about it, our toolbox talks, our monthly operational safety meetings talk about it. Our tracking system, we changed to focus more on, you've heard the word sticky, maybe, from some folks. A good friend of mine at Quantra Services, Matt, he's done a great job with it. He's also on the board at CSRA as well. But, we focus on our actual and our potential SIFs. And at Graham, we just call them P3s would be a potential SIF, or an A3 would be an actual. And you hear it on the radio, you hear it in the meetings that, I had an A1 P2 and I had an A1 P3. And the P3s, we bubble up to the senior leaders, and most, depending on the severity, we talk about it. Those are the ones that are coming to the executive table on the HSE executive committee for review, more so than ever before. So we put a lot of focus on energy release potential and the mitigation or providing direct controls to those. The 2.0 version of all this is understanding the capacity to fail safe, some HOP principles, right? So we're merging, I think, the best of a bunch of different thought processes out there right now into our management system. The capacity to fail safe makes complete sense. The events will occur, so we better have direct controls to prevent them as best we can. And I think it's driving us in a very positive direction.
And maybe just to wrap maybe this portion of this discussion, we may end up coming back a little bit to this. Is would you have any particular recommendations for somebody watching or listening today? And I think speaking specifically about somebody who maybe run a smaller operation. I mean, several people will be watching this and say, well, Graham's a big operation. There's a number of other very large companies. Many of the members of CSRA tend to be larger companies. And it's easy to think, well, maybe that doesn't quite apply to me, or maybe I can't participate in the way that they can. Therefore, how much attention should I be paying to this?
Yeah.
Any thoughts that you would have, that things that you'd want to make sure were imparted?
First and foremost, you can reach out to me. I'll help if I can. I would start with the energy wheel transition if you're not quite there yet. Again, all the material on the CSRA is open source. You don't have to be a member to yield the results or get the information we're pumping out there. You don't have to pay for it. You never will. It's a bylaw we put in place for sure. And so it's free. It's out there. And talk with some of the other folks that are on members like yourself. Some of my peers are members. Bird, PCL, we got, we're all working together on this because it is a community effort, and we need to, quite frankly. So I think there's opportunity. I mean, what I keep saying about what helped us make a flip about five years ago was this energy wheel, and start thinking about how we manage and evaluate safety differently. For me, it started there.
Great, thank you. And again, for folks, visit our website at SCSA. We're going to have a number of links, or a lot of these materials will soon be available there as well. And the Research Alliance, the website's also been dropped into the chat as well for those who want to take a look at that. I'm glad you started there, that we started with this particular talk, what's happening in terms of the science and the studies of safety, because it kind of boils back to kind of something I'm going to say more globally. I'm just going to use that word maybe a little more generically than maybe would normally, but something that is hitting companies globally. And you are a decision maker in your company, Mike. You're at that. You're making business decisions daily. You're not necessarily doing things at the micro level in terms of the operation, but absolutely at the strategic level. And this pivot that we want to be able to make is something that's actually focused on those who are in that decision-making role, whether you're on a board for a company, or you're the owner operator of the company, or you're on the management leadership team. And when it comes to kind of these big topics, we've been talking about, and people much certainly would have heard about ESG, or the environmental, social, and governance elements that are popping up everywhere. And I think, perhaps if you'd be okay, I know that there's some work being done by CSRA, but I think this was such a big topic, it's affecting, and it's going to affect pretty well every business. I think, would you mind just maybe opening up on maybe your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah. Again, I got a lot of obvious passion on this topic. And as a board, last year, I encouraged us to start a research project on ESG for a couple of reasons. One is it's here. We've heard about it. I'm sure we've all heard about ESG investing and the pressures that's putting on industry and the social side of that ESG. It's a bit of the wild, wild west. You've heard me say that before, this ESG ecosystem. But from a safety perspective, all these ESG standards and disclosure agencies and ranking and rating agencies have safety in their KPI or disclosure documents. And what they're asking us to disclose completely contradicts what we're pumping out at the CSRA, i.e. the TRIR, TRIF. So the goal on the CSRA study was to show and produce a paper that will help those industries realign with what we're trying to do and put measures, leading indicators in there that actually prevent fatalities and SIFs rather than the standard TRIR, you're good to go. So, within ESG, by the way, that paper should be released this November. Within ESG, those that may not be too familiar with it, E is the environmental, social is the S, and governance is the G. And for us in Graham, that's under our sustainability strategy. And the E is what you typically expect. It's your waste diversion, which construction, should be focused on and is focused on. Our GHG emissions, our total embedded carbon reduction programs, or benchmarking to get started, air quality, noise and vibration, water, biodiversity. Those are what you'd expect in the environmental pillar. And then in the social pillar, you'll have safety of our products, quality, safety of the public, community relations, Indigenous partnerships, labor relations, health and wellness, which we've talked about earlier. DEI was a big one in the social pillar, and one that we're really focused in on at Graham. And governance is, the board governance, business ethics, code of business ethics, cybersecurity. Supply chain is a massive one that needs a lot of focus, I would say, and general risk management of your business. So it covers everything we do as a business. And, it's heavily focused on, Graham is privately held, but, some companies that are publicly traded are having to go down this path a lot faster than most, and get the rating systems in place and being ranked and rated. We are following suit on that because it's good for us and we need to. We are ready and capable to support our clients who are definitely involved in this to meet their sustainability goals or ESG goals. And
like you raise a great point there, just on that point by itself, because it's not just our companies themselves that may be asked to by shareholders to look at this element, but purchasers of construction are considering this very, very specifically. As a matter of fact, I think we have a couple of slides on this, but it's embedded. The TSX has 60% of the firms that are publicly traded now have this embedded in their executive compensation. So for them as a company to behave a certain way, but also the companies that they purchase from, the expectation starts to flow from the decision makers in those companies on what they're looking for in their suppliers to help them meet their particular goals and targets from an ESG perspective. And so I think it's important for everybody to understand that while you yourself might be a small company and think, well, this doesn't sound like it would apply to me today. It's certainly applying to somebody in the chain that is making a decision. And even if it's an individual, private homeowner that is making some decisions on purchasing, and asking some of these questions, what's the waste like when you're doing repairs on my home? What are the impacts of certain materials or methods or those kinds of things, and just having the ability to have social license to work in a community has got to be very important, particularly with some of the projects that you may be looking at. Mike, we do have a question that might be in the chat that might be one that's interesting for you if you're able to respond to, from Richard there. Are you able to see that?
There we go.
Yeah.
Somewhat. Our disclosure matrix will mostly be GRI, or the Global Reporting Index. I think it best fits the construction industry and Graham's strategy and Graham as a whole, but SASB definitely will be a part of it. And so would TCFD. The Canadian government has laid out some expectations as well for the construction industry, and federally funded projects have some requirements from a TFCD perspective, and it's starting there, and I think it's going to trickle down into municipalities and provincial requirements for sure over time. And the CRA and the SEC and the financial space has requirements as well. So most ESG reporting matrices will label one or many reporting standards like SASB or GRI or TCFD or United Nations SDGs, which was what we follow as well. If you go look at our sustainability report from 2021, you'll see that we're just about to release our 2022 report. But yeah, I think it's a mix. It depends on the company actually and the strategy, and maybe their financial institution requirements.
Mike, maybe a related question to that is, companies may be bidding on projects, particularly in the commercial, maybe public sector type of projects, or public works projects, and there may be some requirements that suddenly pop up that we may not have had to think about in the past, that that are affiliated with trade agreements, or whether it be interprovincial or North American trade agreements, or kind of under the PENWR umbrella. Could you speak to any of those, or any trends that you're seeing there that might be good for people to know?
Well, I think the one that we're all paying attention to right now is that aforementioned federal requirement. One of those is 10% reduction of total embedded carbon from concrete, steel, and wood on federal projects over 25 million. We're figuring all that out, but that's something new that we need to put in practice, and we are ready for it, but we got to have it at the front end of our planning, and have that baseline to figure out what that 10% is. So there's that one. There's been quite a few new requirements in our bidding processes, asking for anti-slavery policies and acts. How are you ensuring your supply chain down the line is not employing slavery or child labor? That was somewhat new to us over the last 2 or 3 years, and there's more coming. But I think it's I keep using the word wild, wild west. It changes almost monthly on sustainability and ESG, where we're going, and it's going to level out, and hopefully there's actually some alignment with some standards. Like ISSB is trying to align a few of the standards and be the source of ESG disclosure and reporting, which would be great for the industry. And there's a lot of work to it, and a lot of people are trying to do the right things. And I think the social side of this is probably going to drive it further than the financial.
Yeah. Well, with that, I would like to be able to maybe go back and bring up that ESG framework, and maybe walk through it a little bit from looking at those elements. Yes, there's some things that are directly safety, but there's ones that maybe we wouldn't have thought of from a safety perspective, whether that be at the individual level, whether that be about safety for the environment. And I what if I can maybe dive into a couple of areas that are that you might be able to speak to. Yeah, thanks for bringing it up here. But in terms of such things as mental health, work-life balance, you talked a little bit about diversity in organizations. All of these things we're finding have some connection to safety, or safety's got some connection to it, that
Mhm.
in the past, we had looked at safety primarily through a physical lens, like as somebody being physically damaged. And we've been learning that there's more to it than simply the physical, whether or not somebody, sustained physical trauma. Um, in your view, how could companies begin to communicate some of these areas? Because, like I said, it's a wild west right now. We don't have a solid template. The template that we've got here in terms of the concepts in this particular document may look a little bit different for somebody else, maybe not a lot. But how does this looks kind of overwhelming if you haven't really been paying attention to this? So,
Yeah.
how do we translate this into English for somebody who's maybe looking at this for the first time, and how can we connect what we're doing in our daily practices into something like this? Because buyers are going to start asking.
Yeah. I think you hit it on the head already, Colin. In terms of safety influences on these pillars of ESG, there's many. To your point, first one I'll go to is mental health and wellness. Understanding, and this is part of the study we're doing, understanding the stressors that are on our front line, our foremen, our superintendents, our leadership in the office, understanding the influence stressors have on decision making ties directly to safety, or can. And part of that research will be to figure out just how much it does, quite frankly. Quality, if you look hard enough and you're focused on it, you'll see quality tied into safety and vice versa. Noise and vibration obviously is tied to a safety and health issues. Our labor relations, I can tie them, quite a few of these, to safety, physical events, for sure. Not a lot, but there's enough in here where they're interlinked. And if you get a chance to look at United Nations SDGs, you'll see that as well. You have to do a bit of a deep dive, into each of those 17 and find the linkages, but there is some rationale to it. And in terms of the social pillar, it's all about people, right? So I would consider all those linked together in some form or fashion. So it's about protecting our people and protecting our communities in which we work, from a safety side, is the way I look at it. And, talent, access to talent, competencies, workforce demands, all those things play a role in safety performance.
And then as we get into the areas of governance, you talked about this a little bit earlier, but how companies can show that they're behaving ethically, even showing the relationship between safety performance and executive compensation. I mean, I'm on a couple of boards, as Kelly mentioned earlier, where executive compensation and safety there's a very strong linkage for the compensation for that particular executive of that organization, and how they perform in these other areas, and the social aspect, the physical health and safety, that the work that they're doing around mental health in their organizations. So if a company is able to, small business or otherwise, be able to describe some things that they're doing, even if it's participating in their local children's activities, sponsoring activities, in order to support their local community. These are the things that I think more and more buyers of construction, particularly from the public sector realm, municipalities and others, are going to become very interested in. And I think that's I think you've raised some really good points, which is part of the reason I wanted to bring that back. So thanks for that. We've got another question in the chat here, Mike, on what should a safety professional say to an executive about adopting the energy wheel and new ways of thinking about injury prevention, considering most safety people are trained to track near misses, incidents, and conduct investigations?
Great question, Edward. I'm a broken record. I'm sorry, but I would bring them back to the defendable science that we're producing out of the CSRA. It's not a consultant's view. It's not my view. It's not anyone's view other than a scientifically proven method of research on what works for preventing SIFs. And the energy wheel most definitely, for me, is the starting point for that. And you hit a very good point about safety professionals, future safety professionals. One of our mandates and focus areas is exactly that. So what do the future safety professionals need to understand going forward? And how can we help them understand new ways of thinking, new theory, new philosophy, new processes in preventing a SIF? Again, culture takes a long time to change. This too will take a long time to change the way safety is taught. It'll probably happen long after I'm retired for sure, unless we get some strong vehicles to help us push it. Collin's associations, other associations, clients, regulatory bodies. I think there's a strong movement right now with HOP, with the science of safety, with traditional prevention, which we need that too. In my mind, it's not one or none. It's a bunch of things that we could put together to help prevent fatalities. And again, I'm a broken record, but that for me, that after almost 30 years in safety, stitches suck. They do, right? But we should be focused on fatalities and SIFs, and that's where our resources and our people should be deployed. So everything we're focused on is that. We don't want to have more Michael stories like we heard earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, this is great, and I'm just watching the time here. Going to be our next marketing slogan: "Stitches suck." Before we wrap up, I know you had some other thoughts that you might want to add before we wrap up this morning, and I hand things back to Kelly, but. But before we do that, first of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. I know we talked about it before. I knew you were going to be traveling, and for you to crack some time out of your day while you're in the midst of travel to connect with us today, I think is critically important, and I'm certainly grateful for that. And for folks who are going to be obviously listening today, but folks over the next while who may be coming back and watching, recordings, which we'll be posting later on. I think we're going to have many people are going to benefit from this conversation. But before we wrap up, Michael, you've got any further thoughts that you might have that you want to be sure that people walk away with?
Involvement, actively listening, grounding assumptions of what we think is the right way to do things, asking lots of questions, challenging sacred cows, if done on the right level and professionally, is a very positive thing to do. At the end of the day, I said it earlier, at the end of the day, it's about making sure our people get home safe every day. And we have to be open and honest with ourselves that some of the stuff I've been doing for 20 years wasn't probably having the effect we wanted it to, and sometimes causing revenge incidents that we didn't anticipate or effects. So we need to be open and honest with ourselves about dropping our egos at the door when we're talking about long-standing safety theory and practices, and open our minds to new ways of thinking. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in this cycle for longer than we want.
Cool. That is awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks again. I think my last thoughts on this is very, very much the same as yours, Mike. Is that challenging ourselves to look at things differently. I know our own board has challenged us to look into the future and be much more adaptive to the world around us. Some of it's going to be research, some of it's going to be technology based.
Yep.
A big part of it's going to be technology based. Even the methods of us constructing things in the future may look very different.
Yep.
With the turnover that we're seeing in workforces and the availability of skilled labor and the ramping up to develop those skills to be able to meet the current demands may have to be addressed differently than we've maybe done in the past. And the
Yeah.
utilization of technology to do that's going to be really, really important. Mike, I think you've seen and I've been invited to look at a few different projects where we're beginning to see more prefabrication and probably something would look more like assembly on sites in order to address some labor gaps and skills, so that we don't have people being exposed to risks in the same way as he has in the past. Will be some of that as
Yep.
well. And I think you had. I remember we had supper, and you had talked a little bit about that. You were probably more blunt when you said it, but I certainly appreciated what you said about that element.
I think I behaved today, though. I hope. So.
Oh, great. So again, thank you, and this will be great recording. Kelly, I will hand things back to you for wrap up for today.
Great. Thanks, Collin and Mike. Those are great takeaways and things to think about today and going forward in the industry. For more information about the Construction Safety Research Alliance, please be sure to visit the CSRA website, which is going to pop up on your screen here in just a moment, hopefully. And I love my title underneath, Host with the Most. I'm going for that velvet jacket. I believe that I'm going to get the velvet jacket this year. So that concludes day one. If you enjoyed today's session, tip your MC, but more importantly, come back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for another full morning of sessions. Enjoy your afternoon, and we'll see you right back here at 8 o'clock.